right, y'all. So last time we did the SAT practice test number 4 from the College Board. It was the first module. We went through questions 1 through 30, I believe. Indeed, 33. So today we are going to go through module 2 of the reading and writing section. So each time I upload, I'm going to go ahead and upload a module at a time. Eventually I'll go on to longer form content where maybe I do the whole test, right? Things like that. So what we are going to do today is to just go through one by one, just like we did last time. And we will see kind of what our answers are and how we can choose the best ones. I'm going to go ahead and choose a bright pink so that you guys can see. Let's just test that. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, so I'll try to talk you guys through this in the clearest way possible. And before we get started, I'll just introduce myself if you don't know who I am. My name is Kate. I am an SAT, ACT, college prep, humanities tutor, and I work with students for whom this just kind of doesn't make sense, right? Like if you see this question and you think, I don't know what this is asking me, or if you get an essay in English class and you're like, I already wrote 5 sentences, I don't know what more my teacher wants from me, talk to me. I can help you out. So I'm really skilled at decoding what's going on here and then translating that into something that you guys can use, whether that be in a test scenario like the SAT or just homework essays, college essays, and the rest of your life, right? Reading and writing are fundamental. So without further ado, we can jump right in. I'll try to stay really close to my mic this time. And that way you guys get the gift of great audio the whole video through. Okay, so 33 questions, module 2. If you guys want to follow along, this is the College Board SAT, so you can find this for free on their site. Number 4, practice test number 4, module 2. Okay, so let's go. Okay. The fashion resale market in which consumers purchase secondhand clothing from stores and online sellers generated nearly $30 billion globally in 2019. Expecting to see continued growth, some analysts blank that revenues will more than double by 2028. Okay, so what we're going to do first is identify the question type. This is a vocab question, so you can see they're asking for a logical and precise word. So really, this is just context clues. When you guys are taking the test, this should be fast. I'm talking like less than 5 seconds. So expecting to see continued growth, some analysts, and this will be predicted. The reason we know it's predicted is because analysts aren't producing anything. They're also not really in the business of denying, because also we see expecting to see continued growth, right? So we know that they believe that they will increase. So that would be a problem if we were to choose denied. C is worried. Again, they're pro-growth, right? So not an issue. Analysts are in the business of predicting, so that's what we're going to choose. Cool. Number 2. Artificially delivering biomolecules to plant cells is an important component of protecting plants from pathogens, but it is difficult to transmit biomolecules through the layers of the plant cell wall. Marquita Del Carpio Landry and her colleagues have shown that it may be possible to blank this problem by transmitting molecules through carbon nanotubes, which can cross cell walls. Cool. Okay, so this one is overcome. Same kind of question as last time, vocab. Again, should be quick. So they're identifying a problem. It's difficult to transmit biomolecules through the layers of the cell wall. So it's a given that Landry and her colleagues want to get around this somehow. They want to be able to cross cell walls, which is what they do, right? So if we go from A, it's difficult to do this, to B, they've done it, what we're doing is overcoming a problem. Cool. Okay. Number 3. Particle physicists like Anya Holloway Arcee and Ida El Khadra spend much of their time blank what is invisible to the naked eye. Using sophisticated technology, they closely examine the behavior of subatomic particles, the smallest detectable parts of matter. Okay, it's another vocab question. And in fact, if you look ahead, everything on this page is a vocab question. So again, quick. This should be fast. So for this one, these physicists spend much of their time probably not creating, right? Probably not deciding, probably not selecting. They are inspecting because they're closely examining something, right? So just as a tip, just like a little test-taking tip here, as we do more of these questions, I'm reading them out to you so that you can follow along whether you're looking at the screen or not. You can always just kind of use this as an ASMR if you want. What I actually suggest that people do, and what you can see me do in other videos on my channel when I'm just doing the work through rather than the walkthrough, right? So this is a walkthrough. What I would actually suggest students to do on these tests is don't even read the paragraph yet. You're just going to read the question. So which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase, okay? And then you're going to identify the question type. That's going to be the first thing. So figure out what kind of question is it. Vocab. Okay, great. Then all you really need to do is locate the blank and then read like right around that, okay? You can then use process of elimination to narrow your answers down if it doesn't come to you right away. If you're really not sure, I would double check for things like closely examine that will help you solidify your confidence in your answer. So that is what I would recommend that you do in terms of strategy for vocab questions. But again, they should be quick off the mark. So number 4. Anthropologist Christian J. Carlson and colleagues examined the fossilized clavicle and shoulder bones of a 3.6 million year old early hominin known as Littlefoot. They found that these bones were blank, the clavicle and shoulder bones of modern apes that are frequent climbers, such as gorillas and chimpanzees, suggesting that Littlefoot had adapted to life in the trees. Okay, so we know that if they're frequent climbers and Littlefoot has adapted to life in the trees, they're similar, right? So we're looking for something that joins these two ideas. So we're not going to choose independent of, okay? We're not going to choose surpassed by, because there's really no evidence to suggest that Littlefoot is better than modern apes like gorillas and chimps. Nor is it going to be obtained from, because of course modern gorillas and chimps come after Littlefoot. So this one is B, comparable to. Great. Number 5. Rydra Wong, the protagonist of Samuel R. Delany's 1966 novel Babel 17, is a poet, an occupation which, in Delany's work, is not blank. Nearly a dozen of the characters that populate his novels are poets or writers. Okay, this one is atypical. It's not atypical, right? So if something is typical, it happens a lot, right? So not atypical, same deal. You get a double negative, in this case, equals a positive. So we'll just go ahead and cross these out for clarity. Okay. Number 6, for a 2020 exhibition, photographer and neurobiologist Okunoloa Dreyfus, if I butchered that, I'm so sorry. Okunola Dreyfus blank a series of new images based on a series of alphabet posters from the 1970s known as the Black ABCs, which featured black children from Chicago. Dreyfus photographed the now adult models and layered the photos over magnified images of the model's cells, resulting in what he called micro and macro portraiture. Okay, so we know this person's a photographer and a neurobiologist, so presumably they're the artist here. So this one's going to be created because we get the sense that this person did the work. They photographed it, they layered it, they did it, right? So that's how we know. And again, like if you're doing this on the test, this should take you 3 seconds, 5 seconds, like really chill questions. Okay, number 7. Another vocab, and number 8, also a vocab question. In addition to being an accomplished psychologist himself, Francis Cecil Sumner was a blank, increasing the opportunity for Black students to study psychology, helping to found the psychology department at Howard University, a historically Black university, in 1930. Okay, so we have two things that we want to think about in this one, actually. This one's a little bit trickier, but still not very tricky in terms of the breadth of what the SAT will usually give you. So we're looking for the right, descriptor, proponent, supplement, beneficiary, or distraction. And we're also looking for the right preposition of, to, of, or for. Okay. So those are really tricky, especially if you're not a native English speaker. These are just one of those things in English that you have to memorize. It's like there's really not a lot of concrete rules around this. I can, give you some pointers if we work together about, patterns related to these sorts of things. But ultimately, it's just, you got to know it. You got to be able to identify it quickly. So in this case, we know that Francis Cecil Sumner was a blank, increasing the opportunity. Okay, so this person helped to found the psychology department at Howard, meaning that they want to increase the opportunity for Black students to study psychology. So we want a positive thing. We don't want distraction for, okay? Even though for would have worked, distraction doesn't work, right? Proponent of increasing the opportunity. Okay, sure. Supplement to. Okay. So supplement I think is, okay, but I don't think it's the answer because this is an initiative that Francis Cecil Sumner started on his own. So it's not that he's like helping somebody else out. He himself is starting this psychology department, right? So, I mean, we see that it says helping, but clearly this is written as if it's his idea, right? So, surely no one can found a department totally on their own. You get the point. This one is proponent of because beneficiary is someone who would have maybe received the benefits of this program, but he's a proponent of, he's a supporter of, right? Okay. Whether the reign of a French monarch such as Hugh Capet, I'm sure it's Hugh Capet, or Henry I was historically consequential or relatively uneventful, its trajectory was shaped by questions of legitimacy and therefore cannot be understood without a corollary understanding of the factors that allowed the monarch to blank his right to hold the throne. All right. So this one I would say is like a level 2. I would say these two are level 2 questions, step above level 1 questions like these ones up here. I would say these are level 1 because, again, quick off the bat, right? Not a lot of analytical thinking necessary. It's a single step question, right? In this, in number 7, you really have to, think about not only the vocab word, but also the preposition. In this case, it didn't really ask us to do too much with that. They weren't really quizzing us on the preposition, but it is something that some questions will do, and you should be aware of that. So has the potential to be a level 2. And then number 8 is a level 2 strictly because of the language here. So this is a more complex excerpt, meaning that a lot of students will have to read this once or twice before they really feel like, okay, I know what this is saying, right? It also is tricky because if you don't know what the word buttress means, right, that's going to be tricky for you. So kind of a know it or you don't situation when it comes to vocab. There are tricks you can use if you are staring down a vocab question and you're really not sure what these words mean. You can study suffixes, prefixes, Latin roots, all that stuff. I would recommend working with a tutor to do that. You can work with me to do that. I'd be happy to help you. That being said, I honestly think your time is better spent elsewhere on the SAT. It's really the best medicine for this kind of stuff is being really well read. So the best thing you can do for yourself is read a lot of books, be curious. You will get a lot more active vocabulary practice doing that than studying out of a book and thinking like, I wonder if they're going to ask me about this word, right? So anyway, back to number 8. So whether the reign of a French monarch such as Hugh Capet or Henry I was historically consequential or relatively uneventful. So either way, right, its trajectory was shaped by questions of legitimacy and therefore can't be understood without a corollary understanding of factors that allow the monarch to blank his right to hold the throne. Okay, so we're looking for maybe a word that means defend. So this one is buttress. Let's see, it's wanting me to select. There we go. So it's basically saying, if you need a little translation of this, regardless of how important or unimportant these leaders were, you can't really understand how they came to power or how they maintained power in light of questions about their legitimacy, unless you understand all of the different ways that they were able to defend their right to the throne. So buttress is the correct word here. It means kind of to put up defenses against, right? Or in protection of. Number 9, some bird species don't raise their own chicks. Okay, that's the one we're reading. So I'm going to follow my own advice here and just kind of give you guys a walkthrough of how I would answer this question now that we're out of the vocab question territory, it looks like. So number 9 says, which choice best describes the function of the underlined sentence in the text as a whole? Okay, so we're going to take this sentence in context and figure out why is it there, okay? So this is more than just a reading comprehension question where you would take some information from a passage and stick it into the answer. This is really an analysis question. So this is, like a level 2, right? You're doing 2 things here, to put it really plainly. You're reading it and you're kind of making a determination about it. Okay, so when we're thinking about function, we're going to ask ourselves questions like, does it support the main idea? Does it, fulfill the need for evidence, right? Does it provide descriptive language for something that we otherwise wouldn't, have an idea what it was, right? So providing context, things like that. So you want to be thinking about things like context, evidence, argument, stuff like that, like these broad pieces of literature analysis that you can apply to these types of questions. It's going to distill this language, you'll see in the answer choices, but you'll still see like snippets of this, right? So it introduces a physical feature of female cuckoos that is described later in the text. So this is saying like it's descriptive, right? B, it describes the appearance of the cuckoo nests mentioned earlier in the text. Okay, also descriptive. The first one is about the physical feature of the female cuckoos, and the B answer choice is describing the nest. So same function, different application. So just you have to figure out which one it is, if it's descriptive. And then C, it offers a detail about how female cuckoos carry out the behavior discussed in the text. Okay, so this is like supplementary, right? It's not introducing anything. It's giving you a supplementation. It's a detail, right? Maybe it answers a question. How do they do that, right? D, it explains how other birds react to the female cuckoo behavior discussed in the text. So this would be like another sort of question answering piece, right? So C and D would be things that you would see usually in the second half of the text, because you're doing the expository kind of setting, stuff in the beginning. What are we talking about? What's the stage? Is it like this particular country, this particular time? And then, the latter half of the passage is going to be more about explaining what the details are of that broad setting. So let's jump in. Let's just read this section. So If you are really going quickly on the test, I would suggest that you just read the sentence. Female cuckoos have been seen quickly laying eggs in the nest of other bird species when those birds are out looking for food. Cool. So we can already cross out A. It introduces a physical feature of female cuckoos that's described later in the text. It's not a physical feature of a female cuckoo. It's a behavior, right? So oftentimes they're going to give you something that is about half true, right? Yes, it's about female cuckoos. It is not about their physical features. It's their behavior. But people who are rushing might see female cuckoos and be like, that's it. Don't be that person. B, it describes the appearance of the nests. That's not it either, because it does mention the nests, same as before, but it's not explaining anything about the nest's appearance. It's just saying, like, here is this behavior of the female cuckoo, right? So I'm liking C because it says it offers a detail about how female cuckoos carry out the behavior discussed in the text. We're going to have to just double check ourselves and make sure that this is the behavior discussed in the text in order to choose C. But if I were rushing, I would choose that right away. D, it explains how other birds react. Okay, so it doesn't really talk about how other birds react. So we basically know that it's C, but I'm just going to double check. Some bird species don't raise their own chicks. Instead, adult females lay their eggs in other nests next to another bird species' own eggs. Okay, so they're describing the behavior right there. So it's nice that we see that they describe the behavior before the sentence comes in. So this is what I'm talking about, right? We are past the initial, setting exposition part of the passage, and we are now getting into details with this sentence that they've underlined for us. We know that we're thinking about birds not raising their own chicks. They've described the behavior. Now we're getting an example of that. Okay, so this one is C. Great. Number 10. According to the text, how did the researchers determine the level of surprise displayed by the cats in the study? Okay, so how did they determine the level of surprise? So what I'm going to immediately do is choose a keyword. You saw that I underlined level of surprise if you're watching this and not in a separate tab. What I'm going to do is choose surprise as my keyword. That's a word that is a great keyword because it's just going to pop out at you, right? So I already see levels of surprise here. And we also, if our eyes are jumping around, see the word conclusion here, which is also what we want, right? How did they determine the level of surprise? We're figuring out how they figured this out, right? Here's another one, low level surprise, high level of surprise. But what we can see from this initial half is it's based on their ear and head movements while the cats heard recordings of their owners' voices from two speakers spaced far apart. So you saw that we didn't even read the passage on this. That's the energy I want you to bring into the SAT, right? It's like, you don't need to. If you're not sure, it is really helpful. If you have the extra time to go back and double check yourself, definitely read them. First pass, or if you're like gunning to the end of this test, if you're going to run out of time, you don't need to. So let's choose the answer choice that best matches that. So based on their ear and head movements, while the cats are listening to recordings of their owners' voices from two speakers spaced far apart. Okay, so we know it's not a stranger, so we can cross out B. It is moving its ear and head, so let's double check that the other ones aren't better. It's not a physical interaction, so like, yes, it's a physical response, but it's not an interaction, right? So again, those half-truths. They tracked how each cat moved around the room. Not true, right? The cat's not moving in this case. It's just the ear and head movements. Yeah. Okay, number 11. A student performs an experiment testing her hypothesis, That's the one we're looking at. So sometimes I'll read the first sentence just so that in case you guys are following along, you know which one we're talking about. Okay, it says, which finding, if true, would most directly weaken the student's hypothesis? Okay, which one is going to weaken the student's hypothesis? So this is a higher level question, right? You're going to have to read this, analyze it, and then make a prediction. Okay, so, or like rather than a prediction, you're going to have to make an assessment, right? So what we need to do is find the hypothesis. That's our first task. If our job is to figure out what's going to weaken it, we first need to figure out what is the hypothesis to begin with. Cool. Let's do that. So again, if you're rushing, the hypothesis is usually pretty early on because it's the guess you make at the beginning of an experiment, right? It's not the result at the end. So I would read the first sentence, see if you get it. Read the second sentence, see if you get it there. And then you can read the rest if you don't find it. But let's just read the first sentence and see if it's there. A student performs an experiment testing her hypothesis, there we go, that a slightly acidic soil environment is more beneficial for the growth of plant Brassica rapa parachinensis, a vegetable commonly known as choy sum. Okay, they're going to get me with these words, y'all. So let's see. We are going to underline a few things here. More beneficial. She thinks that slightly acidic soil is more beneficial for choy sum than a neutral soil. So those are the variables, right? Slightly acidic soil and neutral soil. Those are the things that we're testing. Okay, so the way that we would weaken a hypothesis like this, if you were to take a guess, is finding a way that neutral soil is actually better for the growth of choy sum, right? So let's see what we can do here. The choy sum planted in the soil without coffee grounds were significantly taller at the end of the experiment than the choy sum planted in the mixture of soil and coffee grounds. Okay, so we know from the text that if we jump up, if we look for coffee grounds, it says coffee grounds which are highly acidic. Okay, so we know that the slightly acidic soil environment is going to be caused by an added coffee grounds as opposed to the neutral soil environment. So the choy sum planted in neutral soil is how we can then infer, the meaning of A. Were significantly taller at the end of the experiment than the choy sum planted in the mixture. Okay, so what this would be is pretty close to what we want, right? Like if the neutral one is growing better, then looks like the student's hypothesis would be incorrect, right? So I like that one. Let's take a look. B says it weighs significantly less, same conditions. So we don't want that because obviously we want it to grow better. So I'm just going to cross that off. Choy sum planted in the soil without coffee grounds sprouted significantly later. I don't really like that one as much as I like A. It doesn't say how tall they are, so it's really not talking about something we're concerned with, first of all. And second of all, it just does, like, we're not measuring when they sprout, right? We're measuring what the end is. How tall are they? Significantly fewer of the choy sum seeds planted in the soil without coffee grounds sprouted plants. Okay, so again, we want to do A just because it's suggesting that, if they don't have coffee grounds, they grow taller, which goes against what the student believes, which is that acidic soil would be better for growth than neutral soil. Okay, so that one's A. Number 12. This one, the question is, which quotation from The Young Girl most effectively illustrates the claim? Okay, so we need to find the claim. Same type of question as before. We're just going to take a step back. So it's asking us to find the claim, first step. But then we don't have to make, an argument flipping it. We just have to say what supports it this time. Okay? So let's read the section. So it says, The Young Girl is a 1920 short story by Catherine Mansfield. In the story, the narrator takes an unnamed 17-year-old girl and her younger brother out for a meal. In describing the teenager, Mansfield frequently contrasts the character's pleasant appearance with her unpleasant attitude, as when Mansfield writes of the teenager blank. Okay, so we want her to look nice and be mean, right? In really short notation there. So we're going to find something where they mention her positive appearance and her negative attitude. A, I heard her murmur, I can't bear flowers on a table. Okay, so that's negative. Good. They had evidently been giving her intense pain, for she positively closed her eyes as I moved them away. Doesn't really say anything about her appearance. So A is out. B, while we waited, she took out a little gold powder box with a mirror on the lid, shook the poor little puff as though she loathed it, and dabbed her lovely nose. Okay, so I like this one. She's got kind of an attitude when she's shaking the powder puff, right? But she has a lovely nose, you know? And we get the sense that she's kind of a preening person, right? She cares about her appearance. So I like B so far. C, I saw after that she couldn't stand this place a moment longer, and indeed she jumped up and turned away while I went through the vulgar act of paying for the tea. Again, nothing about appearance. Okay, D, she didn't even take her gloves off. She lowered her eyes and drummed on the table. When a faint violin sounded, she winced and bit her lip again. Silence. Okay, so this one's B. It's the only one that kind of dichotomizes like looks and attitude. Just so you know, some of these questions will be harder. So far, they've been giving us like pretty straightforward ones, but it is possible for questions like this to, I wouldn't say try to trick you. I don't think that's ever the intention. I think the intention is to prompt you to read very closely. So the thing I would suggest to folks is really double check on that second read through once you have a little time at the end of the test. Just make sure the question's as straightforward as you think it is. Sometimes it's not. Alrighty. Number 13. Okay, this one is a big one. We've got a graph. It's 2 columns long. I mean, come on. This is like pre-2016 SAT, right? Just kidding. It's fine. We can do this together. So the graph, don't let it scare you. Don't even look at it until you've read the question at least. Okay, so we're going to read the question. Which choice most effectively uses data from the graph to illustrate the claim? Great. Okay. We don't need to worry about the graph just yet. What we need to do, same as the last two, is find the claim. Okay, so claims usually in the beginning or the end. So let's read the first paragraph, the first sentence of the paragraph. If we don't find it there, we'll jump to the last sentence. If we don't find it there, we'll skim in between. So the first sentence is, high levels of public uncertainty about which economic policies a country will adopt can make planning difficult for businesses, but measures of such uncertainty have not tended to be very detailed. Okay. So then the last sentence says, one revelation of her work is that a general measure may not fully reflect uncertainty about specific areas of policy, as is the case of the United Kingdom, where general economic policy uncertainty blank. Okay, this is the claim. So one revelation of her work, meaning one takeaway is, so one of the claims of her work, is that a general measure, so let me underline this for you, a general measure may not fully reflect uncertainty about specific areas of policy. Okay, so basically saying like, we can't go that far with the data we have, right? We can't extrapolate as far as we want to in every case. So they want us to look at data about the United Kingdom. So they're going to give us this example to back up this claim, right? As is the case of the United Kingdom, where general economic policy uncertainty blank. Okay, so we care about the United Kingdom, which is good. That's what this graph is about. And we care about general economic policy uncertainty. Okay, so we only care about this black bar, general economic policy. We don't even care what the other ones are. Don't even look at them. Okay, so we need to figure out what's the deal with general economic policy. So let's figure out what this graph is telling us. So economic policy uncertainty in the United Kingdom, 2005 to 2010. We are always going to read the title of the graph first. Then we're going to see what it's measuring. So x-axis is time, y-axis is uncertainty. Larger values, more uncertainty. Okay, very funny. I would have thought that they would have, I don't know, in a real study, you're going to get like, it's a score of blank out of blank on this particular, like, I don't know, statistical, exam or whatever. But this is obviously a fake thing for a fake test. So let's see. General economic policy. So we're looking at the black one. We've got here, 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 and here. Okay. So one thing that we can notice about it is it's not really, an outlier. It's not always the shortest one. It's not always the second shortest, but it's not always the highest either. So it's kind of, like middle of the road, I guess you could say. And we see like a general like U curve, very, slight U curve. Because I mean, realistically, like it's between 50 and 100 the entire time, with the exception of this very last 2010, where, it goes in between maybe like 130 or so, or 120 or so. So let's take a look at some options. So which choice most effectively uses data? Okay. A says general economic policy uncertainty aligned closely with uncertainty about tax and public spending policy in 2005. So that's true-ish, right? So that's the middle gray bar, and the, as in like the median color, dark gray and black. They're like similar-ish, but differed from uncertainty about tax and public spending policy by a large amount in 2009. Okay, this is not true, because here we have these two. They're like pretty similar again. So that's not it. So what we're just going to do is evaluate truth value in these answers. So I'm mentioning this because not every question type requires you to evaluate truth value. Sometimes all of the answers will be true and you have to choose the best one to support blah, blah, blah thing. In this case, we are evaluating truth value. We've just proven that one is incorrect. So B was substantially lower than uncertainty about tax and public spending policy each year from 2005 to 2010. This is not true because, as we just saw in 2009, tax and public spending policy uncertainty was actually lower than general economic policy, so it's not that either. Okay, C reached its highest level between 2005 and 2010 in the same year that uncertainty about trade policy and tax and public spending policy reached their lowest level. So we're checking the disparity here, right? Let's see. So what was the year that these other two reached their lowest level? So that would be like roughly like 2007. But again, like this isn't its highest level, right? It's this. So let's read D. Was substantially lower than uncertainty about trade policy in 2005. True. And substantially higher than uncertainty about trade policy in 2010. Very true. So trade policy is the light gray. Okay. Pretty straightforward, right? It just takes up a little bit of time. So one strategy I would recommend for this is if you see one of these questions and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have time for this. All of the questions are weighted the same on the test, regardless of how much time they take you, how hard you think they are, how certain you are that you're right or not, right? So I would, if I were you and you were on a time crunch, I would skip this question. I would put a little marker, big star is what I always do, on the page if you're doing the paper test, or I would just remember the number, like, if you're doing the digital test, which most of you are, and I would return to it later because you don't want to run your time clock out on a question like this, which is worth just the same as the like 3 or 4 other questions that you could be doing in the same amount of time with a higher degree of confidence. So definitely come back and do this if you need to, but the SAT doesn't penalize, wrong answers or blank answers. So it's a low risk scenario. Alrighty, number 14. So we are almost halfway through. I might or might not break this video up into 2. We'll see how we feel. Okay. Linguist Deborah Tannen has cautioned against framing contentious issues in terms of 2 highly competitive perspectives, such as pro versus con. Okay, so that's the question that we're on, number 14. So we're going to do a question that's very similar to the one we did on the last page. The question is, which finding from the student study, if true, would most strongly support Tannen's hypothesis? Cool. So we need to figure out what's her hypothesis, right? Let's take a look. According to Tannen, this debate-driven approach can strip issues of their complexity, blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. So her hypothesis is that debate can strip issues of their complexity and, when used in front of an audience, can be less informative than the presentation of multiple perspectives in a non-competitive format. So debate is less useful for changing people's minds or being informative than maybe like a conference presentation would be, right? Okay. To test Tannen's hypothesis, students conducted a study in which they showed participants one of 3 different versions of local news commentary about the same issue. Each version featured a debate between 2 commentators with opposing views, a panel of 3 commentators with various views, or a single commentator. Great. Okay, so again, you don't really need to read the second half of this if you're in a hurry. Just find the hypothesis and jump to the questions, or the answer choices. So A says, on average, participants perceived commentators in the debate as more knowledgeable about the issue than commentators in the panel. So the panel would be something that is multiple people speaking, you know, non-contentiously. They're maybe on the same side of the issue, or at least they have related perspectives. So really the study is like multiple people opposing, multiple people neutral, single person neutral, right? Like, or pro, or whatever their stance is. So just in case you don't know what a panel is. Okay, so this one would not support the hypothesis, because if the participants perceive the debaters as more knowledgeable than the commentators, then we wouldn't need to worry about, you know, whatever Tannen is saying, that they're less informative if it looks like a debate, right? Okay. So I also want to make a point that Tannen is pitting this debate style against a panel format, multiple perspectives, okay? So the solo, I assume, is just the control. So I just want to like ping that in your brain that we probably don't want to pick something like B, where it's pitting the panel against the single commentator. I'll hold on to it though, just, you know, for the sake of it. But that's my intention, is to kind of teach you guys these like little things as well as the very broad stroke stuff. C, on average, participants who watched the panel correctly answered more questions about the issue than those who watched the debate or the single commentator did. Okay, so this one is really good. Because it's evaluating in a quantitative way that they are more knowledgeable, right? And so we're thinking about which one is more informative. So how do we measure if something's informative? We see if people become more informed than they were, right? Maybe we give them a pre-test and a post-test, something like that. I really like C so far. D, on average, participants who watched the single commentator correctly answered more questions. So again, so that's me kind of predicting the issue, right? They're going to say like, do you want to think about this same scenario as C, but with the single commentator? No, you want C. You want the like the panel. All right, so that one is C. Number 14 is C. 15, King Lear is a circa 1606 play by William Shakespeare. Okay. That's the one. So we're going to read the question first. Which choice most effectively uses a quotation from King Lear to illustrate the claim? Cool. Okay, so let's find the claim. In the play, the character of King Lear attempts to test his 3 daughters' devotion to him. He later expresses regret, as is evident when he blank. Okay, so we've got the test and we've got the regret. Okay, devotion test and regret. That's what we're balancing. So this one on its face is like a level 2, but if you're unfamiliar with Shakespearean English, which I think a lot more students are these days, since you're not reading full Shakespearean texts necessarily in every school district in America, this one could bump itself up to like a level 3 question. So I'll try to walk you guys through this one carefully. So he later expresses regret for his actions, as is evident when he says of himself, "I am a man more sinned against than sinning." Okay, so this one implies that King Lear thinks that he's being wronged more than he's wronging others. Okay? Or just wronging, being wrong in general, right? So I'm not really a fan of this one. B, as is evident when B says during a growing storm, quote, "This tempest will not give me leave to ponder on things would hurt me more." So basically saying like, while this storm is brewing, he's not able to focus on, the wrongs that are being committed against him, right? So like, again, it's like, I don't really see how that would count. If it were a metaphorical storm, like maybe, but the answer choice says during a growing storm. So like we have to assume it's a legit storm. C, when he says to himself while striking his head, "Beat at this gate that let thy folly in, and thy dear judgment out." Okay, this is an expression of regret, right? So he's creating a metaphor of his head as this gate, right? So he's like cursing himself, like, why did I let this in? Like, why did I let myself, believe this or whatever? This like silly thing, this folly in. And why did I let my best judgments leave my brain, right? Like, why did I forgo that and settle on the silly things? So that's pretty good. I like C, okay. And then D says of himself, "I will do such things, what they are yet I know not, but they shall be the terrors of the earth." Okay, that feels like an early game statement, right? Where he's like, I don't know what my plans are, but they're going to be crazy. So this one is C. This is the only one where he expresses regret for his actions. Cool. C, Shakespeare's not so bad. 16, we get another Shakespeare, as if to reward us for number 15. This one, the question is, which choice most logically completes the text? Cool. So this one is kind of a reading comprehension, kind of a predictive one, right? Like, what would best fit? So let's read. Many of William Shakespeare's tragedies address broad themes that still apply to today's audiences. For instance, Romeo and Juliet, which is set in the Italy of Shakespeare's time, tackles the themes of parents versus children and love versus hate, and the play continues to be read and produced widely around the world. But understanding Shakespeare's so-called history plays can require a knowledge of several centuries of English history. Consequently, blank. So what this is really saying, and what you should always do when you read like a big chunky paragraph like this, is be like, okay, what did I just read? Like, what am I supposed to take away from this, right? So what we've got so far is Romeo and Juliet is this really well-known play by William Shakespeare that people still find relatable. They find it relatable because it deals with things that people, no matter time and place, all can relate to, right? Like we've all had like a little fight with our parents. We've all had like love versus hate, you get in a fight with your friend or whatever. We've all dealt with that. So the barrier to entry is very low on Romeo and Juliet as far as like relatability is concerned. Okay. But like reading something like King Lear is maybe a little higher because the barrier for entry is like you have to know several centuries of English history to really get it or like really have it hit for you in a meaningful way, right? Like maybe you can appreciate the writing or something, but like you're not fully getting the gist of this play unless you can catch all the references, right? So we're expecting to see something in the answer choices that's like setting up, a separation between Romeo and Juliet, which is like up here on the relatability scale, to these history plays, which are like not as well known, not as well read into the modern era because they have such a high level prerequisite. Okay, so which choice most logically completes the text? Many theater goers and readers today are likely to find Shakespeare's history plays less engaging than the tragedies. Okay, mood, that's probably a good one. Let's hold on to it because it's got the modern, like, reader or watcher, right? Like, viewer, not relating to these history plays. Cool. And we get the comparison to the tragedies, which is important as well. So I really like A, but I'm going to read the rest of them because this is an informative video. B, some of Shakespeare's tragedies are more relevant to today's audiences than 20th century plays. Yeah, so like, yes. Okay. Sure. But they're not 20th century plays. Is like my main thing. We're not comparing them to like other plays. We're comparing Shakespeare to Shakespeare, right? Okay, so Romeo and Juliet is the most thematically accessible of all Shakespeare's tragedies. Sure. So like I was telling you earlier that like sometimes you don't need to evaluate truth value in answer choices, right? In the previous one we did. In this one, I'm thinking they're not wanting to have you evaluate the truth value. They're wanting you to figure out which one is best, right? Which most logically completes the text, right? So we can assume that all of them have some logic behind them, but one of them has the strongest logic, right? Cool. So, this one is A, and it's because, like I said, we have the modern audience. We have the pattern. They're likely to, find Shakespeare's history plays less engaging than the tragedies. So we're comparing tragedies and history plays, and we're making a determination about are they more or less interested in one or the other. Cool. So that's the best one. B is like, again, possible. Like there are probably some really unrelatable 20th century plays, right? Like, I don't know about the Industrial Revolution or something. But like, to be honest with you, that's not what we're talking about. So skip. C, Romeo and Juliet's the most thematically accessible. So like, this is something that I would expect to be like the next best answer. Like I can see a lot of people choosing C and getting it wrong. Because like, yeah, it's true, right? Like that's kind of what it's saying. However, to logically complete the text, we want to have this balance between the history plays and the tragedies. We don't just want to make a sweeping statement about the tragedies and leave everything else out. D is experts in English history tend to prefer Shakespeare's history plays to his other works. So it's like, okay, maybe historians would like the history stuff better, but like, I don't know, man, like that's not what we're concerned with, right? It's also kind of a dubious assumption. I don't know. Cool. Okay, so we're going to go up to the end of this page and then I'll do let's see. Yeah, we'll go up to the end of this page. That sounds good, right? Okay, and then we'll do the next one next time. Okay. So, number 17, we've got the same type of question. Which choice most logically completes the text? So, let's read. Ancestral Puebloans, the civilization from which present-day Pueblo tribes descended, emerged as early as 1500 BCE in an area of what is now the southwestern United States and dispersed suddenly in the late 1200 CE, abandoning established villages with systems for farming crops and turkeys. Recent analysis comparing turkey remains at Mesa Verde, one such village in southern Colorado, to samples from modern turkey populations in the Rio Grande Valley of north-central New Mexico, determined that the latter birds descended in part from turkeys cultivated at Mesa Verde, which shared genetic markers appearing only after 1280. Thus, researchers concluded that blank. Okay. So, what do we think we are going to do here? Like, what did we just read? Let's just think about that. If you're listening along, I'll give you a second to practice what we've learned so far today. So, yeah, so read that again for yourself if you need to, and then ask yourself, what did I just read? What's the takeaway? Okay, great. So what I think we are taking away, and you can put in the comments what you think for this question or the next one or the next one, because we'll do some trials for those three. What I think we're taking away from this is, so they're comparing Turkey remains at Mesa Verde and this north central, like Rio Grande Valley location. So we know that the Rio Grande turkeys in part descended from Mesa Verde turkeys, right? So in addition to that, we know that only after 1280 did these genetic markers in the Mesa Verde turkeys appear, right? So, interesting. The disbursement also happened at the late 1200s CE mark, right? So let's read our options and see what we got. Conditions of the terrains in the Rio Grande Valley and Mesa Verde had greater similarities in the past than they do today. Okay, it's more about the turkeys than the terrain. So I don't really like A that much. B, some ancestral Puebloans migrated to the Rio Grande Valley in the late 1200s and carried farming practices with them. So that's kind of what we can estimate, right? Like right around the time of the disbursement, these similar turkeys started showing up in the Rio Grande, right? In the Rio Grande Valley. C, indigenous peoples living in the Rio Grande Valley primarily planted crops and did not cultivate turkeys before 280. So that's not really what we want to believe, because it says they're established villages with systems for farming crops and turkeys. So we know for a fact that they already had turkeys. So I'm not really a fan of C. So then D says the ancestral Puebloans of Mesa Verde likely adopted the farming practices of indigenous peoples living in other regions. So like maybe, but like we don't really have any evidence to suggest that, right? So this one is B. So if you selected B, good job. Okay, let's see. Number 18. Which choice most logically completes the text? So this one is just like the one that we did last page, and also the one just now previously. So we're going to read this, and then I'm going to give you a second to develop your thought. What are we looking at? And then kind of come up with your answer choice. So you can put that in the comments if you want. One challenge when researching whether holding elected office changes a person's behavior is the problem of ensuring that the experiment has an appropriate control group. To reveal the effect of holding office, researchers must compare people who hold elected office with people who do not hold office, but who are otherwise similar to the office holders. Since researchers are unable to control which politicians win elections, they therefore what? So we can imagine that what do we think? So take a second, think about your answer. Yeah, so what I would say here is, since researchers are unable to control which politicians win elections, they therefore are having some trouble coming up with an effective study, right? Like a really foolproof, watertight study. So let's see what choices we have. So which choice most logically completes the text? A, struggle to find valid data about the behavior of politicians who do not currently hold office. I don't really know about that one so much. We're mainly concerned with people who do hold office and then like this control group of people who don't, right? B, can only conduct valid studies with people who have previously held office rather than people who presently hold office. It's more that in my opinion, it's more that they're struggling to identify the right people to study. Like they're not really sure who to target because they don't know who's going to win elections and who isn't. So they're not sure, like, who do we talk to? Who do we track, right? So C is should select a control group of people who differ from office holders in several significant ways. This one doesn't work because the control group definitionally can't differ from the office holders in several significant ways. If they did, then they wouldn't be a control group, right? We're wanting to isolate the variable of holding office. So we have to make every other variable to the best of our ability the same. So that's the only way we can isolate the results. So this one is D. Will find it difficult to identify a group of people who can function as an appropriate control group for their studies. So that's what I was saying earlier, right? Like, it's just hard to find the right people. You don't know who you need to talk to. Okay, last one for today. In his groundbreaking book, Bengali Harlem and the Lost Histories of South Asian America, Vivek Bald uses newspaper articles, census records, ship's logs, and memoirs to tell the blank who made New York City their home in the early 20th century. This one is a grammar question, so we're going to end super easy. Put your thoughts in the comments. Give your best guess and why you think so. So what I'm noticing is that it's supposed to say, and memoirs to tell the stories of the South Asian immigrants who made New York City their home, blah, blah, blah. So multiple stories, right? Cool. So let's get rid of A and B because story apostrophe S is a possessive. It would be one story that has ownership of something. Not what we want. So C and D both have plural multiple stories, i.e. S, right? Interestingly, though, D has two ownership markers here. So we've got stories as if stories, own something. And then immigrants as if they own who, right? Like it doesn't quite make sense. So this one is C. Stories, multiple stories of the multiple immigrants. And then I think the ownership thing is like, obviously the stories belong to the South Asian immigrants, but when you flip the structure like this and you say, instead of South Asian immigrants stories, in which case you would say immigrants with an S apostrophe stories, in C, you're going to flip it and then you don't need the possessives at all because you have of the preposition, which does that for you. Stories of the South Asian immigrants who made New York City their home. Great work, everybody. Thank you for following along with me. Like I said, today we were doing the SAT practice test number 4. So we were doing module 2 of, I think, 5, if I'm remembering correctly. And we ended on question number 19. Next time, because we've been streaming for an hour, we will do the second half of module 2. Alrighty, you guys, if you have caught on to this video since we started, my name is Kate. I am an SAT, ACT, college prep humanities tutor. So anything English, history, psychology, that kind of thing that you need, I can help you out. I'm doing this series to go through SAT practice tests with you so that you can see behind the curtain a little bit. How are these test questions written and how are they solved? So I will see you next time. Have a great weekend and have fun.